Today on Locked On Huskies, we've got former UW strength coach Ron McKeefery, who said he wanted to dedicate this episode to the city of Seattle, which he said over his 2 years here couldn't have been more welcoming to him and his family. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson down there this time. He writes for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation Sports Illustrated. I'm the site editor over with Huskies Wire. And today with us, we've got former UW strength coach Ron McKeefery. It's so great to have him here. And thank you for making this your first watch or first listen today, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So, Ron, speaking of getting started, let's jump right into it. It's so great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, really appreciate you having on, and a big fan of you guys, and just appreciate all that you guys have done for myself and the rest of the team the last couple of years.
We really appreciate you saying that. And I remember you tell me when we were down in Houston that you yourself are an everydayer and that you do listen to the show. And I remember telling Lars that we're like, all right, that's awesome. Little peek behind the curtain there. That was really cool to hear. So we really do appreciate you and everything you've done for this Husky program as well.
Yeah, anything that I could do to kind of find a little extra nugget to be able to know our guys better, I'm always searching. And so you guys do a great job of kind of getting some in-depth stuff, some off-the-wall stuff, and things that I can kind of throw at the guys every once in a while, which was fun. So appreciate that.
Hey, we love to hear that. So, Lars, do you want to kick it off with our first question for Ron?
Yeah, so basically, obviously, most Husky fans know who you are, but for those that don't, you're the strength coach this past two seasons, I believe, right at Washington. You've known Kalen DeBoer for a long time. Kind of just take me through, obviously, 2022 was great. But obviously 2023 kind of spoke for itself, obviously, just for so many reasons. What would be your kind of favorite memory? What was kind of maybe one of your top two memories from this past season?
Yeah, I mean, the last 2 years have been fantastic. You couldn't have probably wrote it any better other than maybe pushing it off with a win, right? But, so many great moments, so many great memories, rushing the guy, the fans rushing the field, fans traveling to both bowl games. I thought that was such a big deal, and just seeing the kind of the pride in the program. The first Oregon game away, the first Oregon game at home, were both, that was probably one of the loudest stadiums I've been in, and I've been coaching for 25 years. And so, tons of great memories. I think probably my favorite memory from this last season as a strength coach, it's probably the Oregon State game. We were in a pretty big stretch there, and I remember looking at that game on the front end, going that was going to be a tough one on the road after a long stretch of tough opponents. Maybe not the emotional high that maybe some of the other opponents might be, but still a formidable opponent and a tough opponent. And something we were going to roll our sleeves up and go out there and get it done. And now you throw rain and awful weather into the mix, and everything that you throw against our team happened in that game. And all the work that I feel like we've done for those 2 years culminated in a pretty powerful moment in our season, I think, and you just had to look at the guys before the game. I mean, we didn't, it's a really tight stadium, really tight locker room. And so we had to stretch out in the rain, on the turf, in the cold. And our guys didn't think. I mean, they were ready to go, and that's something that as a coach you take a lot of pride in. That you put a lot of effort in. You try to put them in moments as much as you possibly can, and our guys rose to the challenge, and it was a special game.
So we've heard a lot about just the conditions down there. We weren't able to get down there to Corvallis for that one. I heard from some friends of mine that were down there. They just had like puddles in their pockets by halftime. Were you dealing with some of those same issues during the game?
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was full on rain the whole game. And I think it's a combination. Their fans did a fantastic job of creating a tough environment. As soon as you're turning the corner on the bus, you flip off by everybody, and it was fun. It's college football is supposed to be played with passion. That's what makes to me, that's what the difference is between maybe like the NFL and college, is the passion and the pageantry and all those types of things. And that was, every bit of that. And then you throw the weather conditions in, and obviously what our offense and where we're best is maybe on turf in the dome or something along those lines. But our players, they responded and just a heck of a game.
So speaking of just being in, sorry, Lars, go ahead.
I was glad you mentioned the Oregon State game, because that was actually the one game before the season, now that we're going to be transparent a little bit, that Roman thought you guys might lose. I picked USC for, again, kind of the other, to your point, the fact, that's more of an emotional high type of game, because to your point, Oregon State was a really tough out this past season under Jonathan Smith. So I was glad you picked that one. Right.
And where it just ended up landing with the season was, we ended up being everybody's cancellation game there at the end. And so, USC was in it until we beat them, and Oregon State was in it until we beat them. You got everybody's best shot, and to continue to rise to the challenge each and every week, spoke to just the fortitude of our players.
So talking about best shot there, is that something where you, as the strength coach, is that something you take a little bit of extra pride in, especially once the season goes along and you see what's building, knowing that that's going to happen from USC, from Oregon State again, from playing Oregon again, knowing that you're going to get that best shot week in and week out, and just seeing how your guys respond to the challenge throughout the season?
Yeah, I think as a coach, you're constantly you want to be playing games that matter, at the end of the year. And, those games all mattered. So you knew that the emotional part was going to take care of itself a little bit. But emotion's only part of it, right? You have to be able to respond, physically and mentally, and to be able to do that week after week. And that's the stuff that you're building in this time of year, in January and February and March. And you're building that metal, throughout this time. And, I'm sure you guys talk to the players as well, but so many players pointed back to those moments, in January and February and in the summer, as things that they lean back on, knowing that they wrote for it. And so, yeah, you take a ton of pride in our guys responding to the challenge, and then doing it with a smile on their face and with passion, and doing it when everybody was either rooting against or stacking against. And so, as somebody, I grew up single parent, 5 kids, and all those types of things. I take pride in being the underdog.
Lars, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I was going to say, kind of building off that. I don't know if we want to necessarily mention specific players, but obviously throughout this past season, there were a number of players that really seemed to kind of tough things out. Did you notice this team kind of just having, I guess maybe when did you know, maybe kind of continuing on to your point about January and February, that this team really was kind of built for anything and built to stand all that it was going to have to withstand, not just on the field, but then through the injuries and things that piled up?
Yeah, obviously, when Mike, committed to coming back for another year, several of the other players to come for another year, you knew that you had a chance to do something special. You finished so well, a lot of positive momentum, and from where we started to where we were at that point, you felt like the team had taken huge strides in terms of their togetherness and those types of things. I think specific moments that stood out to me, our winter workouts are always they're a pinnacle, something that you can just watch the different competitions that exist in those workouts and see that they're, the guys are operating at a little different pace. We had one specifically where we took them outside and pretty chilly weather. And again, I think back to that Oregon State game again, these guys came out, it's snowing, they're ripping their shirts off and doing the stations in full tilt. And, there's a couple glances around the coaching staff going, all right, we got a chance with this group, and then I think in the summer, we really challenged our guys. We didn't feel like we rose to the challenge in that first year in the trenches maybe as much. Wanted to be able to push people around in that second year. And so really challenged our offensive and defensive lines to be able to drive and move humans. And so we loaded the prowlers up with about as much weight as you possibly could and did rep after rep on the field. And not did they on and take pride in it, but, the rest of the guys, after they got done with their running, the skill guys would come over and motivate those guys. And a few of them jumped in even. And so you knew you had the right camaraderie. You knew you had the right makeup. Every year you got to have some of the luck, bounce your way sometimes. But I mean, our team was ready to go. You could feel that throughout the year.
We're going to keep going with Ron right after a quick break, because we've got to send a message to our good friends over at FanDuel. You can get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel is an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. So, Ron, you talked a lot about just the toughness, the resilience of some of those guys. Who are some of the workout warriors, for lack of a better term, really, that might have stood out to you that are going to be that are coming back to UW for the 2024 season that impressed you for one reason or another?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many guys that the one thing about our program was that it was set up in a way that you were really truly an outlier if you didn't work hard, if you didn't put everything out there. So there's so many guys that did that on a daily basis. It's probably hard to mention just a few, but I mean, I think some guys that I'm really excited to see their growth and to see what they can do. I think the Parker twins. I think those guys, they have an opportunity to be really, really good players. I think, Tristan Dunn is a guy that bleeds purple and gold. That's got all the measure, he's got the length, he's got the passion. He's a guy that is not afraid to put his face on you and strike you. So I'm excited to see him continue to grow and play. Denzel Boston is a guy that would push Rome and Jalen and Polk each and every day in conditioning, and didn't. Sometimes freshmen, they kind of look around and they say, they say, okay, I don't want to put myself past these guys because they're kind of the measuring stick. And he wasn't afraid to run out there and jump out in front of them and push those guys, and so I'm excited to watch him play. Yeah, I mean, there's so many great guys. Zach Durfee is a guy that I'm, with his tail off, had everything stacked against him this last year. And so I'm excited to see him after a full year of training, after get his head in the right space. I love that kid. I think he's going to be a great player. And then I'm really excited to see, Carson Bruener and some of the returning leaders, get their opportunity to go and be that full-time leader. And, Carson's a guy, again, that bleeds purple and gold and operates at a high level. So tons of great players coming back. Super excited about where they're headed going into this next season.
Yeah, so kind of to parlay that in a way, because one thing that we kind of come to learn, maybe a little bit peek behind the curtain for some fans, is college strength coaches spend more time with the players than coaches do. Especially and certainly during the offseason, right? Because coaches have so many limitations of why they can't be around. And then Kalen mentioned a lot during his tenure that it's a player-led program. So when you're kind of building the offseason plan and you're leading the team through basically as the de facto head coach for them for the time being, because you're leading the strength program, how do you balance kind of like knowing who to lean on, or do you just kind of sit back and how did you let the last 2 years kind of develop? Because obviously you had some veteran leadership, but it seemed like some younger guys, like you mentioned, Carson, were also just as much of those leaders.
Yeah, I think, when we came in, the biggest challenge that you're facing, and I want to be super careful how I, say this, is that,
right.
There was really, it was a challenging time. There was a lot of post-COVID still happening at that point. Guys hadn't been trained really for a couple of years because of all the limitations because of COVID. Obviously, the 2 coaching changes and all the the trust and things that go along with that, and how that affects your training. And then so when we came in, I think the first thing that I've always done everywhere I've ever been is it's not player led right away. You have to set the example. You have to show them. You have to define good, and you have to give them a destination and have them rise to the challenge. And so we were very much a coach led program at first, first quarter, to establish a solid foundation. And then from that point, now you find the opportunities to get the players to speak in front of the team, to let them lead certain drills, to let them, make decisions that impact the program in a positive way. And you support that with leadership training and our unity council and all the things that we did behind the scenes to kind of foster that leadership and that growth. And it's a combination of all those things coming together that lead to that player-led team at the end of this. And one of the things that I always tell the players is that, not myself, not any of our coaches walk across that sideline on game day. And they have to be able to lead one another when the bullets are flying. And so my job as the strength coach was to put them in as many situations as possible for them to when they got into that chaos, that they were calm and chaos. And as a strength coach, you get to do that on a daily basis, which is why I love what I do.
So you talked a little bit about some of those challenges that you might have had when you first got to UW, just in terms of COVID and some of those other things. What were some of the biggest challenges that you felt you had to overcome from the actual logistics of your job as a strength coach, where you might have changed some workouts from guys previously? Because we're going to talk about it a little more later. There are 13 guys going to the combine, maybe a couple more that should have been invited. And I feel like that's a big credit to you and how you're able to develop some of these guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim Saha, strength coach before me, did a fantastic job. I think the coaching staffs before it did a fantastic job as well. I think, our system's a little bit different and how we go about it. I think our program's built off of the training partner. I tell our players that, I expect their training partner to be the best man in the wedding, not the guy that's going to tell them what they want to hear, but they're going to tell them what they need to hear. And so if they're not getting their work done, then I'm usually blowing up their partner and not them, because their partner's allowing it to happen, And then within that, there's another group of partners that's with them at the rack, and then you got a coach at the rack. And so every rep of every set is controlled, disciplined, and held at a high standard. And pretty soon, you walk around a lot of different weight rooms around the country, whether high school, college, pro. And you look around, and there's a lot of people that are working hard, and there's a good amount of people that are just kind of trying to get by. And people that are high achievers, that pisses them off. They don't like that. They don't. That creates friction within the team. So what we had to do is we had to make it so that every single guy was working at a really, really high level. And so when you looked around the room, you were an outlier if you weren't training at the highest rate. And so by putting a coach at every rack, by making sure that our groups were pushed, the training partner pushed their partner, the 2 groups within the rack pushed each other. You created competition by putting first string, second string, and third string platforms right next to each other and creating, daily competition, and moving guys up and moving guys down based off their effort. That fosters an environment where you can't not get better. And so I think the biggest challenge that we faced is just them daily operating at that level of accountability. That was hard during COVID and all those types of times, and so, I thought our guys rise to, from where they started to where they finished. It was a huge stride in the way that they approached their training each and every day. But more importantly, their trust in one another, fostered through those types of types of things, is really what was probably the biggest change from the start to the finish.
Do you want to go to ad real-
Go for it.
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna say I wasn't sure you want to go to an ad or not. This one you might want to answer somewhat quickly, or feel free to take as much time as you want. You mentioned coaches that are going to be at the rack. Roman and I, obviously, we kind of got to be on the receiving end of Jamarcus Shepard's the Jamarcus Shepard experience, if you will. What was it like with this coaching staff and Jamarcus in particular? Because I'm just so curious to know about it because he just seems like an electrifying person. I mean, it was in all a good way. Just kind of like, how do you balance how the coaches help with the racks versus like how you and this specific strength staff work with the players in that regard?
Yeah, when I was talking specifically to strength staff, and so you set yourself up in a way where you could have, your 5 full-time strength coaches, and your interns and whatnot at the racks working with the players. But to your point, strength and conditioning only works as much as it's supported by the coaching staff. And we had a phenomenal coaching staff that believed in what we did each and every day. And every time that you might have been a little too sore or you might have been a little too tired, those kind of complaints fell on deaf ears upstairs, and so, it's January, February, that season's a long time away, and you don't necessarily like working that hard at the time. There's growth and comfort, get better, if you're taking weeks or days or months off. And so, our coaching staff was very, in tune with what we were doing. They're very supportive. We incorporated them into the workouts with like our winter agilities and those types of things. They were elite coaches and they coached at the highest level. And again, that's why, it's a combination that success is a combination of having elite coaches with elite players all bought into the same mission. And that's what happened this last year.
We're going to be right back with some more right after a quick break. So, Ron, like I said a little bit ago, Washington has 13 players going to the NFL draft. That's a school record. It's the third, to the NFL Combine. It's the school record. It's the third most in the history of the Combine itself. Can we just talk about a couple of the guys who you think might be able to really improve their draft stock there? I know a couple of names that have been circulating throughout just social media and everything from Washington's perspective, or Dom Hampton, who got a shout out from Daniel Jeremiah the other day, and Devin Culp especially. Those two guys seem like they're going to do really well in Indy.
Yeah, I think obviously we got some players that are just going to knock it out of the park, and they're expected to, right? Mike and Troy and Rome and Bralen. I mean, those guys are going to rise. They're going to be as advertised, and everybody's going to, it's just going to be validated for sure. I think you're right. Dom Hampton, Devin Culp, they're going to help themselves tremendously because they're going to run very well. Both of those guys are going to run very well. Both of them are going to lift, well for their position. And, I think the part that goes unnoticed a lot of times, and having been on NFL staffs, is, when you're in those moments, everyone's got, they can run and they can jump and they can lift, it's when you separate yourself out in the interview process. And the thing about, players from the University of Washington is they're smart dudes. They are smart dudes that, are high achievers, not just on the football field, in the classroom as well. And, when they get in front of general managers and head coaches and they see the character that these guys have with the intelligence and the football IQ that they have, those guys they're gonna shoot up the draft board, if not, they're gonna get, teams are gonna get a steal on them for sure. But I'd say those guys are gonna do well. Yeah, I mean, I think every single guy that's there is going to represent themselves in a really, really positive way. And I think Roger Rosengarten is another one that's probably going to turn some heads as well.
I was going to say, yeah, just to build off of that, I know it's obviously not for any specific reason why Roger's name wasn't mentioned, but just kind of specifically about Roger, just because the discussion with him was he comes back and plays left tackle, but from an athletic standpoint, him coming out of Ballard Christian, always kind of known as an athletic sort of guy, kind of just how much do you feel his, like that frame of his and that just kind of his general style of play will build in the NFL to maybe why he didn't have to come back?
Yeah, I think, I'm always a fan of players developing for as long as they can college. I think that's, I think, if I'm being honest, I think Roger could have benefited more from another year maybe. But I think at the same time, But he's made a decision. I know, having talked to him, and I know he's fully committed. And the thing about Roger is that when he is laser focused, when he's got something on his sights, he's going to go after it with 1,000% intensity. And I know Roger will rise to the challenge. I think he did that in the Senior Bowl already. And I think he's going to go out there, and there's no doubt in my mind he's an NFL offensive lineman. There's no doubt in my mind that he's going to have a lot of success in the NFL. I think that, I think sometimes when you're talking, I think he's an elite player that with the right amount of attention, then he'd be that first round guy, and so my hope is that, he's able to close that gap by not having that attention maybe, and that sole focus from scouts and GMs and those types of things, that he can close that gap in this offseason with the Senior Bowl, with the combine, with the draft process and those types of things. And so I think Roger's going to have a very, very long career. I think he has got the right personality to have a ton of success in the NFL, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that are pleasantly surprised because they maybe weren't looking at him as closely as they should have been.
So I kind of in that same vein, I'm really curious to talk a little bit more about Bralen Trice, because I feel like Bralen, the more that I kind of look around draft media and everything else that's going on, we're seeing guys like Dallas Turner and Lea Tulatu really rise to the top. Whereas Bralen has kind of gotten lost in the general term of, maybe he's a high second round pick at this point, where I feel everyone on this show might disagree with that. But what is it about him that you think might stand out most? Because one thing I remember talking to Eric Schmidt when we were down in Houston was that he just has a motor that goes and goes and goes. And just how often does that show up in the weight room? And just what are some of your other impressions of him?
Yeah, you hit the right. You said it exactly right. I think Schmidt obviously coached him and knows as well. I don't know if it's going to show up in the combine process, just the motor. Now I do think, again, when they get to talk to him and they learn how smart he is, and they learn how much football IQ he has, and how, he's not a guy that's always constantly pounding his chest and bringing attention to himself and those types of things, they're going to love what they see. They're going to fall in love with them. And when they put on the tape, they're going to find a guy that just never stops. And those guys, the draft process, so it's a flawed process, and you can go through a lot of examples of where guys have, wherever Bralen Trice goes, and I agree with you. I think he should be, high draft pick. He is going to have maybe the longest career out of the guys that are listed, and it's solely on the fact that he will do everything right all the time with 1,000% intensity. And, I'm excited for Bralen. I think he's going to have an incredible NFL career.
Lars, what do you got?
So I'd be remiss. Obviously, I mean, we've kind of touched on the 2023 season, certain players, and it's not for any specific reason. I don't feel like we've mentioned it, but I'm surprised we've gone 28 minutes. I think this might be a show record without talking about specifically Michael Penix and just what that kid meant to the program from the day he got in. I remember he actually. It's hard to catch Mike off guard by a lot of things. I think it's a fair assessment, just whether you're talking to him or anything. He's just like, okay, that's cool. Okay, that's cool. He's able to roll with the punches. His parents told me after he came back from the first kind of spring winter conditioning sort of period that he used to dip his hand into their homemade cookie jar because his mom would make him some homemade cookies. And he stopped doing that and never did that ever since he came back. And it wasn't a punishment, but it was Mike's mentality of like, hey, I got to lock in. I got, no small thing can go unnoticed. Like, yeah, you're dipping a little bit into the candy jar. Well, that's a first or second round, third round difference. There's a Heisman or a not even in a finals kind of sort of thing. Just a small little things to help with your health. Just what was he like just the past couple of years? Do you have any like a specific Mike story or anything that you could just one practice? I mean, I'm sure that maybe the beats practice, obviously when he gave the whole team beats, that was a cool moment. But just I guess just talk about your view of the Michael Penix experience.
Yeah, Mike, when he came in, I think what people forget is that he wasn't the starter right away. He had to earn that spot, and guys like Dylan Morris and others really challenged Mike to be the best version of himself. And, then again, he had to come in, earn his respect, do it by working hard. And I think the biggest thing is that Mike knew he used it as an opportunity to, to build some armor. I think that he understood that maybe those were some of the reasons why he had been injured through the years, and he understood that he needed to put a different focus and a different mindset toward training, maybe than what he had done in the past. And so he a combination of him coming in, being pushed by Dylan and others, and seeing the results and seeing how his body changed and how he liked how he looked and how he liked how he moved. And then obviously staying healthy in that first year gave Mike a focus going into his last year that, he was laser focused and is the ultimate competitor, wants to go out there and push every day. He's constantly a guy that would be challenging guys to finish their sprints faster or further or with more effort or more intensity each and every day. I think the thing that I respected most about Mike is the amount of people that were pulling on him, the amount of attention that he got. The dude never changed. He was the same guy each and every day. And to kind of have that type of poise and to respond physically like he did, Mike's he's gonna do incredible things, not just on the football field, which I feel like he's gonna have a very long career, but that guy is gonna do some really incredible things just in his community and and around the globe, I think. I'm fortunate to coach him, super excited for him, and I think we're only seeing the beginning of what Mike Penix is going to continue to accomplish on the football field.
So before we get out of here, Lars, I'm really glad you asked that question relating to cookies because I have a food-related question for you, Ron. You've been here in Seattle for 2 years. As somebody who exercises, works out in strength, what was your favorite cheat meal that you had during your time here in Seattle?
Oh, good Lord. Yeah. I think, I got to the weight room at 5 o'clock in the morning and I left about 9 o'clock every night. And so, to say that I saw all of Seattle would probably be mistaken. There were times that I was able to get away close to the university and go down to Joey's and get their chicken parmesan. And that was pretty good. That was pretty good. So chicken farm, Joey's, I think that's what I would go with.
I feel like that's a whole new level of endearing yourself to Husky fans. Just mentioning Joey's. That's a real veteran move by you, Lars. What do you got?
And in a positive light, bravo to you, sir. That's all I'm going to say. You made the right reference to Joey's, and that's the perfect. That's what we call the on the record way of doing this.
There we go. Perfect.
Ron, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Lars, as always, thank you as always for being here. And all our everydayers, thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And if you want to make sure that you subscribe, because we're going to have so many more fun guests coming your way this offseason, make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure you leave a like on the video, leave us a comment down below. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it all really does help the show out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will talk to you on Tuesday.